Alright, in this video I think I'm going to actually kind of retrace some of the points I made in my World War II did not end the Depression video, but it looks like I'm coming out with a series here on World War II, so I might as well just go for it. Like I said before, it seems clear to me that Roosevelt wanted to be a famous president, and in the first term and a half, almost 2 terms, really the first 2 terms he was in office, that meant fighting the Depression, and he fought it in the most proactive way he thought how, which of course was a disaster. However, once World War II started, or around, not the day it started, but at some point while it was raging, he decided that that was going to be the big deal. And it seems like in hindsight that would be obvious. However, you know, the conflagration that we call World War II did not begin in such, I don't want to say momentous, but it wasn't obvious from the get-go that it was going to be as big as it was. Germany made demands against Poland that, as far as nationalism is concerned, quite frankly aren't that unreasonable. Huge areas that were formerly Germany were just given to what is now Poland after World War I. It's not unreasonable for them to resent that, and actually the areas that they wanted were mostly German anyway. They're actually a strong Nazi party. There's a whole story here. Pat Buchanan has a good book on it, actually. The British gave a war guarantee to Poland, which is a really bad idea, because then whether Great Britain gets in a war with Germany or not is dependent on not anything the British do, but what the dictators in Poland, it was a military dictatorship in Poland, it depends on what they do. And to top it all off, they were not in a position and unwilling to really support Poland either, so it's kind of like telling your buddy you've got his back. You get in a fight, but you don't actually help your buddy, and your buddy gets killed. That's basically what the UK and France did to Poland. However, after the fall of France, Hitler really wasn't keen on a war with Great Britain. He did not see their interest as being contradictory, because he imagined Germany having this European hegemonic state. He imagined the British retaining their empire, which, as far as he was concerned, didn't conflict with each other. Again, he made the mistake of thinking that they would allow anyone to be a hegemon in Europe. And it's not clear what FDR was thinking all the time. I remember watching a documentary that was showing the various exchanges he had with Churchill, and one constancy in these exchanges is Churchill is always doing everything he can to convince Roosevelt to aid Britain in whatever way possible, whether that be to get involved or whatever short of that. Roosevelt's side of the dialogue is not consistent. In fact, it seems at times that he is leading Churchill on, and I believe that at some level, I think he was probably thinking along the lines of, I might not be able to get into this war because the Americans don't want to get into it, but because the belligerents, namely Germany, aren't going to get in a war with the United States. So he might have been thinking along the lines of, maybe I could broker a peace. That would look, that would establish me as an important figure in history. There's a famous letter he actually wrote to Hitler at one point. It's funny because Hitler reads it in the Reichstag, and it says, "Please don't invade the following countries," and he lists like every country. And I'll start laughing. It's a really funny video. I'm sure you can find it online. But at some point, it's clear that FDR decided that for sure that we were going to go to war. Whether he ever imagined anything other than that, it's debatable. But at one point, probably in the spring of 1940, he just decided it was going to happen, and he wanted to make it happen. And in the popular conception of FDR, you know, he has these dual legacies. One is the Depression, and one is World War II. What most people don't really understand is he really, in terms of administration and policy, that dichotomy is very explicit. he went and got rid of. There was a debate, but it was a very short debate. You still had all these reformers from every different kind of leftism. They weren't consistently communist or Marxist or labor union. They were a patch of all in his administration, in the bureaucracy, at the top of it anyway. And among them, some of them took, some might have had pacifist positions, some had pro-Soviet positions, some were for the war, and some of them thought, well, we should nationalize armaments, have the government set up armories, which is a pretty common practice in Europe at the time. And these arguments were dismissed. Basically, they were never seriously considered, and the decision was made by Roosevelt. There was a consensus of this at multiple layers of the government that no, we're going to have private industry is going to build our armaments. And when that decision was made, Roosevelt got rid of a large part of his New Deal people, fired, or they were demoted, or they were made subservient to others. And he did this for two reasons, I think. One was to allay the fears of business in general, and the other was he didn't think that these people were going to be good at running a war economy anyway. And so he appointed a number of businessmen, quite a few businessmen, actually thousands of businessmen, who became board chairmen of the various cartels and socialist boards that were going to run the economy during World War II. And the thing is that people still didn't trust the government for good reason, and they were still reluctant to enter into contracts. You think it's the Depression, they need money really bad. Yeah, but you can say you sign a contract to build Jeeps or whatever, and what if the war ends in a year and you've spent more money than you made just remodeling your factory? It's totally possibility. So what they did to really encourage this is they eventually worked out a platform where they would pay basically the cost, and then they would tack on a commission on top of that, which is another way of saying you are guaranteed profit. And prior to this period, the way the Army filled orders for munitions and weapons and socks and everything was they would place an order and say, this is what we need, and then companies that wanted it would bid on it, and whoever either had the best product or could provide the good at the lowest price, they got the order. I guess what would you call this? Open bidding. And that's how the military ran. I don't think it ran that way in World War I, but from the period before World War I and the period after World War I. The problem with that is you've got to be competitive, and it's hard. A lot of companies would actually lose money doing that, and nobody is going to, risk that process. And so, what it came out as, well, we'll just whatever it costs you, we'll pay that, and then we'll pay some on the top. It's a guaranteed profit. And the government actually allocated more money in a 3-month period in the spring of 1940 than they had in the entire time period from World War I up until that point, which would be 22 years about, in just 3 months. And this did succeed in having a large number of munitions created. Here again, this is 18 months before the war actually started. I think this is clearly said a decision was made to go to war at that point, because this was a major rearmament program, the biggest ever in the history of the world, quite literally. It'd be like just, I don't know, there's nothing really to compare it with. And they had all kinds of boondoggles where they would go and a lot of companies would say, well, we want to build a shipyard, but it takes 2 years to build a shipyard, and by then the war might be half over. So we don't want to be these shipyards that build battleships and destroyers. They can't really build civilian craft, or if they can, it's basically you have to rebuild the factory. And the government say, that's fine, we'll buy it off you at the end, or we'll pay for its construction in the beginning. or we'll cover the cost, whatever. And so this is when the military-industrial complex was born. It's interesting because a lot of leftists, decry the military-industrial complex, but they hail World War II. World War II is where it comes from. That's when it was born, and that's when it grew up. And I said here, well, it produced a lot, and Michael Moore will say, "Oh, socialism's good. Look at World War II." You hear this a lot. It's not a fair test because you have the United States, which is in a socialist command economy, fighting other countries that are also in socialist command economies. If one socialist country defeats another socialist country, that doesn't prove socialism is good. That proves that one socialist country was able to defeat another socialist country. The test would be a free market country versus a socialist country, or that would be the test. Two socialists getting in a fight, one of them winning, doesn't prove socialism is stronger than something else. It should prove that socialism is stronger than that socialist. Now, during the war, expectations of its duration changed. At the very beginning, there was a lot of pessimism, and a lot of people thought the war might last a very long time. Around the end of 1943 into 1944, a lot of people began to realize this is actually going to end in a year or two, or maybe less. A lot of people thought it would actually end before 1944 ended. And there became a big reluctance at that point for companies to keep the output, keep expanding the war industries, and so the government had to induce them even more. Bought a lot of factories and that sort of thing. And most of this stuff was mothballed after the war. Very little of it had much applicability to civilians. And I mean, most of it that continued to be used after the war, continued to be used for the War Department. Not, they didn't start making refrigerators and washing machines. So. Where to go from here? I think I have to cover some of the problems I have with the course of the war before I come back to the economic issue and FDR's death, which in my view did actually end the Depression. So I'll do that in the next video.